Welcome, new and old friends. My name is 2482, and tonight is Scary Stories Volume 20. Our first is about a terrible death of a sister. The second about why you should be careful around water. Last, but never least, is about a beloved aunt and the loss of her child. So, turn off your lights, make sure your doors and windows are locked. It's about to get spooky. The priests chanted religious verses as they thrusted their crucifixes at the beast. Their eyes widened in horror as it grinned and spoke the words, "I am not a servant of Satan. I was sent from above." 4 Facts About My Sister's Death by Threads in Needles. 1. Sometimes, in rare cases, identical twins can be separated from each other and live separate lives, never knowing the other exists. The twins may live in the same country, or even the same city, and just never happen to meet. With 8 billion people on Earth, strange things happen often. 2. Facial recognition software is becoming more and more accurate, and therefore more and more common. 3. Drones can be equipped with the software for various purposes. Drones can also be equipped with weaponry, such as missiles, in conjunction with this software to make them especially lethal. 4. Terrorists are often not given a trial and instead killed on sight. I laughed, running around and enjoying my new ability to stop time. My excitement turned to fear as I realized something was chasing me. Water by Prophetic Sea. Sarah frantically ran through the halls of the makeshift CDC building, trying to get out with her life. Her team had been called to some backwater town in Alabama to investigate the water, the locals complaining of it causing illness and being poisoned. Local health officials refused to touch the issue, citing some bull regulation that made it finally land on the desk of the CDC. Everything was normal at first. They had set up a temporary building and had begun testing for a few days when they began to notice strange things that had nothing to do with the water. Dead animals, ripped apart, would be found outside the compound. Strange sounds throughout the night, things that kept the team on edge, things that could not be explained. Then tonight, something crawled out of the water they had contained within the lab. It began attacking the team, a low guttural moan coming from the mouth. Tentacles covered in spines lashing out, embedding themselves in flesh that began to bleed. And the thing began to feed. Sarah was almost at freedom, almost out, when she saw the seal close around the containment door they used. The mayor of the town was latching it close, tightening it and sealing her in. She began to pound on the door, trying to get him to let her out. The mayor shook his head, sadly looking at her from the other side of the plexiglass. She understood now. They had never been here to fix anything. They were here to die, to keep the sacrifice going. She closed her eyes and began to pray as the guttural moans grew louder behind her. I'm usually not the type to get scared in graveyards, but I can't help but wonder why the coffins have locks. I found letters that my aunt had written to her deceased son by I Stan Catwoman. It was Saturday morning, around 9 o'clock, and I was still in bed, when I received a text message from my Aunt Marin. It was a request for me to come visit her as soon as possible. This was rather unexpected, as I hadn't heard from her in months. About 3 years earlier, my aunt and uncle had lost their only child. My cousin David was only 8 years old when he had drowned in a pond on their property that my aunt and uncle owned. It was a devastating blow to both of them. Sometime after David's death, they were divorced and my uncle moved away, but my aunt continued to live at their home. She hardly ever went out, and soon cut contact with all of her friends and most of her family. In fact, I was the only family member she had maintained contact with. However, over the last 6 months or so, she had stopped calling me and wouldn't respond to my calls and texts either. I texted her back asking if she was okay. I never received a reply. I had a strange feeling in the pit of my stomach and decided that I should go to see her. My aunt lived in another state and I had to drive for 6 hours to get to her residence. But for an aunt who had been nothing but kind to me when I was a child, this was something I was glad to do. I arrived at my Aunt Marin's sprawling estate in the late afternoon. Her once beautiful garden was in a state of disarray, with weeds growing all around. I entered the house and immediately a putrefied smell assailed my nostrils. It was the smell of dust, damp, and rot. Visually, the interior didn't fare very well either. There were cobwebs growing at every corner. The antique wooden furniture looked like it hadn't been cleaned in years. The house-proud Marison that I knew would have been horrified at such conditions. I called out to her, telling her I was here. I was greeted only by the brooding silence that seemed to engulf the house. I looked for my aunt all over and found her in the study. She was sitting on her reading chair. She was perfectly still. I said her name as I approached her, and then placed a trembling hand on her shoulder. Confirmation of what I had feared came when I faced her. My beloved aunt was dead. Right in front of her on the table was a picture of my cousin, David. I was overcome with repentance for not visiting her sooner, for not checking up on her more often. I wiped the tears off my face and noticed that my aunt had something on her lap. On closer inspection, I saw that it was a small doll that looked eerily similar to her son. A chill ran down my spine when I saw it. Had she gotten involved in something strange? I suppose grief and living in a large home all alone could do a number on someone's mental stability. I called the emergency hotline. The paramedics confirmed that she was dead. I was questioned by the cops, and it was easy to confirm that I had just arrived in the city. I later found out that my aunt had consumed poison to take her own life. I figured that the pain of going on without her child was just too much, and she could bear it no longer. Before she died, she had made her will and had left the property the house, and all its contents to me. I was staying at a hotel while I made arrangements for her funeral, called relatives, my uncle, etc. I could not bring myself to spend a night in that house. The atmosphere was just so heavy. I like to think of myself as a rational person, but I felt this anger, hateful gaze regarding me any time I went there. It made me feel like I wasn't welcome and that it wanted me gone. A day before the funeral, I had to go to the house alone as I needed to find a nice dress that my Aunt Marion owned. One that she could be buried in for her last repose. I was looking through her closet when a particularly elegant violet dress caught my eye. I imagined my aunt wearing it when out on a date with my uncle. How ravishing she must have looked in it. As I tried to take it out, it seemed to be caught on something. It was the door of a small compartment at the back of the closet. I put the dress on the bed, and after a moment's hesitation, I decided to look into the compartment. It was a small space and contained some old photos and a few papers. The pictures were of my aunt, my uncle, and my cousin. Some only had my aunt and uncle, while others had all three of them. I put them down and began to look at the papers. They were letters from my aunt to David. The oldest one had been dated just 2 years ago, a year after David passed away, and the latest one had been written on the day my aunt died. I read the first one. My dear, sweet David, Mommy loved you. She really did. She never meant to cause you pain. I just couldn't do it anymore. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Being a mother is hard, David. I had to give up my whole life to raise you. Please, son, forgive me. What was this? What was my aunt apologizing for? Did she blame herself for David's demise? I read the next one. David, why don't you understand? It was difficult for me. I tried so hard to be a good mommy to you, but I only had you to make your father happy. I never wanted you. I couldn't do it anymore. David, won't you please just leave? Leave, David, please. For Christ's sake, leave. She never wanted him? I read a few more that were just like that one, my aunt just rambling on about how she never wanted a child and how sorry she is. Pieces of a horrible puzzle were coming together in my mind as I read each letter. Stop this, David. Stop frightening me. End this torment. Why don't you understand? It was hard for me to be a mother. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to hurt you. So I gave you a painless death. I just wanted your dad and I to go back to being happy, the way we were before you were born. David, you're a selfish child. You were always so selfish. You drove your father away from me. Even in life, you came between us, so I got rid of you. I had to. But your memory took him from me. David, you ruined my life. David, you evil child. And now you want to keep me here to torment me? Leave me alone, David. Just go. Leave David. The last letter my aunt wrote, the one she had written on the day she died, read, David, you vile, evil creature. I won't let you torment me anymore. I won't, David. I won't let you keep me here. You never loved Mommy, did you? After all I did for you, you selfish, evil creature. I'm going to escape, and I'll come for you now. Yes, David, Mommy is coming to punish you, you evil child. Mommy is coming, David. Mommy is coming for you. In this letter, my aunt had confessed to the murder of her son. Had it been the guilt that had driven her insane? Or was it something else? I couldn't just stand there and ponder over this too long. I heard, from a distance, what sounded like children's laughter. It was very faint, but was enough to send me scurrying to the safety of the outside world. I took the dress and the letters with me. I gave the dress to the funeral director and told no one about the letters. Yes, my Aunt Marian was a murderer. Yes, she had done a dastardly deed. But what good would exposing her do now? It would only serve to crush my uncle, who had finally moved on and had a new partner. I decided to burn them. Years have gone by since then. I still own the house that my aunt and uncle had lived in, where my cousin had breathed his last. It remains vacant. I just can't seem to sell it. I've tried to rent it out, but the tenants don't seem to last more than a few weeks. I guess David is still very angry. I received a note signed by my friend who died months ago in a car crash when I was driving. I noticed my hand fading away as I finished reading. You need to believe that it happened to be on the other side. What do you think of these chilling tales? Tell me down below. If you enjoyed this video, then hit that like button and make sure it feels it. Of course you subscribed because 42 is itching to find new stories. Come back this Thursday for our day stories. Sleep tight and don't let 42 bite.